Full effect mode. Bun down is the sound. You know how we do. This is the lounge on Twitch. And today, first time ever, I've got co hosts. What? Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up to my co host for today. None other than Eloquent and Jake Palumbo. What's up, fellas?
What up?
Hey.
What it do? What it do?
Glad to be here.
How's everyone doing today?
Good, man. It's a beautiful day outside. What better way to talk some graps?
Yeah, for real. It's not miserable outside for once, so have some coffee and talk some wrestling.
There you go. There you go. I can see that I'm the only one that kind of nerded out. I'm wearing my Cody shirt, my pre WWE Cody shirt.
Right.
But everyone else is dressed in their skivvies today, so it's all gravy.
I'm rocking the Witty Hutton. Shout out to Martin.
Hey.
Shout out to Brahman. But I mean, I got an FTR shirt that I was wearing yesterday somewhere around the crib.
Okay.
But
okay.
I was gonna say I've got wrestling memorabilia all over the crib if I need to put some in the camera shot.
No, man, you're rocking low life. We good.
Word.
Squeeze up my the old AEW title, and I mean, I got hell of action figures like all around the crib. So.
Okay. All right. Well, here's how we're going to get things started. Typically on this podcast, we always ask our guests, and both of you have been on the show before. We've asked you this before. How were you introduced to hip hop culture? But for the purposes of today's wrestling edition, Top Ropes and Topes with Eloquent and Jake Palumbo, my question to start off today is, how were both of you introduced to professional wrestling?
I mean, for me, I think the first time I'd seen it was, I mean, I would have been 4 or 5, so that would have been back in like 90, 91, somewhere around there. And you know, it was just just like WWF on TV. Like I never saw like a pay-per-view for the first time until like, you know, like way the fuck later. I don't know. I just remember, you know, your guys like Piper and Hogan and Savage and those guys. And then later, you know, they would show WCW on like Saturday nights, like way back in the day. And I fell in love with it pretty much immediately. You know, super colorful characters, and you know, at that age, you know, I thought it was real, and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I mean, my fandom didn't really like sort of climax until much later, but yeah, around like 91 or so is definitely where it really kicked off.
Okay, Jake, what do you say?
To try and condense, you know, 20-something years into a 2-minute elevator pitch. You know, I saw wrestling for the first time when I was a little kid, like in the late 80s. And, you know, enjoyed it, but didn't get too deep into it until around 1995, when I'm making kind of the transition into being a tween. And, you know, it was a couple things going on. You know, we had the beginning of what would later become the Monday Night Wars. I also, you know, I've lived in Brooklyn for 17 years, you know, basically half my life at this point. But, you know, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm born and raised in East Tennessee.
No, I never tell.
Yeah, I know. There's no way you can tell. But basically, you know, I had the misfortune of going to high school in a terrible town called Morristown, Tennessee. But that coincidentally was the town that Jim Cornette happened to run Smoky Mountain Wrestling out of. Because it was an untapped territory. It was very, you know, cheap cost of living because everyone was poor. And, you know, we didn't find out until years and years later that Rick Rubin was the silent benefactor for Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So at that time, they had shows every Sunday at Morristown East High School. I also lived down the street from White Lightning Tim Horner. As you know, and that's if you've ever heard Jim Cornette's epic rant about how much he hates Tim Horner, it's worth your half hour. But anyway, so as time goes on, like, then, a year or two later, I'm getting into high school and the Monday Night Wars are heating up, and I just leapt into wrestling with everything. And we didn't have the internet yet, and kayfabe was still kind of alive at that point. So I'm a person that, like, I invest emotionally into everything I'm doing, whether it's music or watching wrestling or whatever. So, I would get very deeply entrenched in it. Like when Shawn Michaels took the belt off of Bret Hart, like I was crushed for weeks. And so as time goes on, wrestling just starts seeping its way into my life. Like even my friends and I, we discuss real life issues by using backstage wrestling terminology. Like if one of us goes on a date that doesn't go well, we'll come back and be like, yeah, I got jobbed out tonight. And Or, if we're making fun of somebody, we'll call them a mid-carder. And, it's so deeply entrenched just into everything I do. But to speed up and bring us to present day, I moved to New York in 2006 for the purpose of trying to do hip hop. And it was around that time that I kind of started falling out of touch with what was currently going on in wrestling. Like I still tune in for major pay-per-views and, try to keep a foot in. But what later happened is the way that I'm able to keep wrestling in my life kind of 365 days a year is the emergence of things like the Conrad Thompson podcasts and the network. And I have the ability that, like, if I don't like what the WWE is doing right now or what AEW is doing right now, I can just immerse myself in some random episode of Mid-South Wrestling from 88 and, not kind of exist in this other little ecosystem. So out of touch as I might be, like wrestling is still 365, part of my day. So I'm never too far away from it.
Jake, man, you really hit it on the nail. And I could tell by, our boy Elaquent's reaction here. Using terms like kayfabe in your normal everyday speak is very much a real thing.
Right.
And that's a shoot, brother.
I talk about like, oh man, this dude over there didn't put me over.
Right.
That's part of like my everyday lingo, yo.
Yeah.
And the homies be looking at me like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
if you're not in the know, it just sounds like gibberish. To the outsider, it just sounds like gibberish. But if it's almost like and I guess it literally is a coded language because it originated to try to protect the business and to not let common folk know what was actually going on. So yeah, I mean, I think with most wrestling fans, like it just kind of ingrains itself in you to where it goes beyond sitting down in front of the TV and being entertained.
That Carney lexicon is real.
It's weird because it's like, I almost feel like at odds about it sometimes because
we're not workers.
Right. And like one of my biggest pet peeves is when, like I'd see wrestling fans online talk about, oh, this dude's a mark or some shit. And it's like,
that word.
It's like fam. It's like, like wrestling nerds calling other wrestling nerds.
Yep.
Like, come on now. But, on some level, I feel like, like I'll go to a show and I'll try very hard when I'm just like sitting there with my boy and I'll try to not refer to people as faces and heels and stuff like that because it's like, well, that's for them, like that's for the people in the ring. But then like I mentioned before, I'll get back home and I'll talk about, oh man, I really put that producer over. And I have to like sort of catch myself like, all right, Al, you're kind of speaking out of both sides of your mouth.
And on that note, maybe let's just quickly run over some of these terms that we've okay. So we brought up a mark, which the definition of a mark is essentially a mark. I mean, that I think it translates over into regular life too. Right?
Into the regular world, I think it means about the same thing. Yeah.
You've got kayfabe. Right, and kayfabe is essentially, as you mentioned, it's protecting the business through coded language, I guess.
It's an old carnival term, actually.
Yeah.
It dates back
There
to
you
the
go.
carnival. Yeah.
Which is obviously the roots of wrestling are obviously that.
Right.
A shoot is something that's real. A work is something that is pretend.
Right.
Any words we've thrown out yet that we haven't defined?
I mean,
yet?
we can go deeper. Like
we could go nuts.
No, literally, like I used to. I know we're going to get into the music aspect of it later, so I won't go too deep. But, you know, I used to on stage take bumps. You know, like I would finish a verse and like I know how to do a flat back bump. And, you know, people in the audience would be like, oh, my God, you fell and hurt yourself, you know. So as you get older, I had to stop doing that a little bit less. You know, I really only kind of bring it out for the big shows now. But my point is that like, I go home and like if my knee hurts, I'll be like, well, I hard weighed myself. You know, it just we could literally go if we went to Wikipedia to the encyclopedia of terms, like we could probably find a practical application for almost every facet of life.
Yeah, like for real. Yo, there was a you mentioned what it's like bringing like when you go to a live show. I personally, the guys I go with, they're just as, you know, smarty marky about wrestling as I am. So we sound like, you know, your typical wrestling geeks at a show. But, you know, if my wife happens to be in the room when I'm watching wrestling, she's literally looking at me like, you are an alien, man.
But I mean, I also think that's almost. I mean, at this point, you know, we've all sort of gone through, at least most of us have gone through that era of like kind of wanting to almost hide or like disguise your fandom a little bit. Like, I mean, nowadays it's like I wear my wrestling fandom like, you know, like on my sleeves.
Yeah.
But once upon a time, you know, it's like I'll be at my parents' house and I'll be watching like Raw or SmackDown or something, and you know, like I can convince my dad to watch it with me, and he can still like suspend his disbelief. But you know, like my mom will walk past me and like, oh, can't believe you're still watching this thing. This thing's for babies, and it's like, well, it's like, oh, it's so fake. Like, look, he's not even really hitting them, and it's like, well, all. You know, that movie you watched yesterday is fake too. What's the difference?
Right.
So that lends me to want to ask this question. When you were first introduced to this obviously infectious form of entertainment, what was it about wrestling though?
I think for me, I mean, I've always just had a love for combat. You know, choreographed or otherwise. You know, Dad's huge into boxing. I'm a big kung fu movie fan. And you know, and wrestling is sort of cut from that same cloth, and it's like, you know, the same things that we enjoy in movies and superhero TV shows and things like that. I mean, we're talking about terminology and the language. I mean, you can sort of apply all of that to any other form of like TV or whatever the medium is. Ultimately, you know, these are just stories about good guys versus bad guys and good conquering evil, and I think that's something that's timeless and everyone can gravitate to. I mean, you know, a lot of people might find wrestling silly or hard to believe, but ultimately those principles are still the same. And so, you know, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, where, you know, like all of the wrestlers and were characters and they were so over the top. You know, like what's the difference between that and, I don't know, Batman or Superman or something like that, right?
I hear you. What about you, Jake?
To build on what Elle said, you know, I mean, the reason that we attach ourselves to these things is because, you know, wrestlers are superheroes. Wrestlers are a larger than life persona. And I think in the same as he said that people identify with Batman or, with any fictitious character, the reason people connect is because there's something in that character that they find applicable to themselves and what they're going through in real life. So when I was a displaced teenager in America, dealing with, whatever issues I was dealing with in high school at the time, like I would watch Bret Hart on television and feel like he was almost shouldering my problems and was giving me like a blueprint on how to handle it, because I was a person who, prided himself on details and technical precision and trying to do the right thing and fill in the blank and fill in the blank. In that same aspect, I related to Ric Flair because I'm also a raving lunatic who will make bad decisions and then try to clean up the aftermath. But so saying that to say is that, like, in the same way that when I was 16 years old, I told my parents I wanted Wu-Tang Forever for my birthday, and they got it for me. And I'm viewing Wu-Tang as this like crew of Avengers who had my back,
right?
That made me feel less fearful in certain situations. Well, wrestlers were applicable the same way. And again, we'll get to this later, but when I started doing hip hop, it fell perfectly into place because you're playing a character that's an exaggerated version of your real self. So I, to this day, as a 40-year-old man, like I still go through life like applying Terry Funk or Bret Hart or, these people that I look up to what I'm currently going through. Like that's something that I don't think will ever go away. There's always going to be something that happened in wrestling that's applicable to what you're going through right now.
Oh, yeah.
And as we said before, like if you're not in the know, that's going to sound so strange and unusual to the outsider. But
right. Yeah. But I mean, you can look at, like everything that happens in life. I mean, we've all been in situations where, like, let's say you work at a job somewhere, and you might have that coworker who kind of stabs you in the back to get ahead. Like that's Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. That story right there. There's. Like, there's these real life things that you sort of experience, and there's probably a wrestling parallel to it. And we sort of like to and I think that's the same reason people gravitate to like comics. I mean, you sort of see parallels of yourself in this other media form that you're indulging. But yeah, I agree completely. There's everything sort of recycles itself, and like there's so many various wrestling storylines, old and new, that might have a striking resemblance to people, something you've gone through. It's like I played a show a few months ago where I was supposed to go on at a certain time, but the opening act took went way over his time.
Ran over time.
And then I was just thinking of, oh man, like, so that's what so and so felt like when them bloodline segments go 45 minutes on the show. And like there's a parallel to literally everything.
Yo, who was there anyone in particular that introduced you to wrestling, or did you discover it on your own?
I mean, for me, I kind of just caught it on TV. And I just thought like, yo, this is pretty unique. This is pretty cool. And then I saw it a few more times, and I didn't, at least at the time, I didn't know that wrestling was like a thing or that it was really big. Right. And I just remember going to school, and I think I overheard someone talking about Ric Flair or Rick Rude or Hulk Hogan or something, and I kind of overheard like, oh, yo, you guys watch wrestling? Like, oh yeah, man, like everyone does. And which, and leading into like the Attitude Era, where like everybody was tapped in on some degree. So it was kind of like validating that, oh, okay, this thing that I'm thinking is cool is not as silly as maybe I initially thought it was.
Right.
I
Guys, don't
saw.
mind my camera.
No, you good.
all
I
good.
saw wrestling for the first time when I was, like I said, probably about 5 years old or so, because my grandfather would watch it occasionally. But I had a momentary interest in it, but it wasn't until I was a little older, like I said, around 95 or so, that I kind of saw it on TV, and just it hit different the second time. And met some kids at school who kind of had the same passion for it. And I was in a backyard wrestling federation, when I was in high school.
Hey.
And the fun, like the hilarious part about it was when I was little and would try to put wrestling on the TV, my mom hated it and would tell me to turn that off. It was silly. When I get to high school and I'm actually actively backyard wrestling and I'm not going out and getting arrested, and my mom is realizing that, like, hey, he's actually just working on his submission holds and things like that. Then all of a sudden, she was with it, and she starts trying to learn, who all the different workers are, and, who's dope and who sucks, and things of that nature. So they could only afford 1 or 2 pay-per-views a year, which would usually get Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, unless WCW was doing something special. But then the others I would listen to, you've heard the term Scramble Vision.
Oh, yeah.
So I used to listen to pay-per-views on Scramble Vision like some, World War II era man listening to a ball game on the radio. Like, it was, that's how hungry I was for it at the time. So it wasn't until it was mostly self-discovery, and but when I fell in love hard with it. Like, I was reading the Actor magazines, the PWI Almanac, like all that.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So,
man,
Crazy.
When I was coming up, when it came to wrestling, like, I was introduced to wrestling through my dad. He was like this crazy wrestling fan, and at the time, the territory that was big in this area was AWA. So we actually had AWA showing on local television, like local cable. So you could like actually, turn the channel to it. And I just saw him watching it one day, like, what are they in swimming trunks, and are they in a boxing rink, and what's going on, but I mean, he's been a fan literally as far as back as I can remember. So I've seen him watch it for like my entire life. And I guess just having it around just got me into it. You know what I mean? He took me to my first wrestling show at the old barn, the Winnipeg Arena, AWA show. And I think it was game over at that point, because it was like I'd been to a circus and it felt like a circus, but it was way cooler than a circus. And I think it was just, it was game over. You know what I mean? I'm still watching it right now.
I was gonna say, it never goes away. It never goes away.
I mean, we'll probably touch on it a little more later, but having sort of finally gone to a live show for the first time, the TV experience, I feel like it doesn't really do it justice. Like, I had so much fun just being there and sort of sort of taking on the energy of the crowd, and so I can imagine, like, the way that I felt after watching a few live shows for the first time. It's like, I remember just sort of being posted up right next to this dude and his probably 4 or 5, maybe 6-year-old daughter, and and she was so into the show, and and I remember when someone caused a ref distraction and the other guy runs in and hits the baby face with the belt, and this girl is just like losing it beside me, and it's like, yo, this is so dope. And and sort of over time, and we're all quote unquote smart fans, and the insider lingo, but just seeing such a pure reaction from someone who probably legitimately thinks it's real, and it's like, yeah, like that, like I almost forgot about that feeling. It's a beautiful thing, man. It's beautiful.
Do both of y'all remember when you realized, oh, So it's not what I think it is.
Um, uh, I think that. I mean, there was various. I mean, I remember like on the playground, we'd be talking about wrestling, and and there'd always be like the one person who had to make sure everyone knows, like, yo, this is fake, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I remember hearing it, and it's like, well, I mean, some of the punches they throw definitely. It feels like they should hurt them more, or why aren't these guys like bleeding? Like,
How'd they get up so quick?
how did they get up so quick? And like, yo, the Undertaker just dropped this guy on his head. How is he alive? But when you're invested in something, and part of your emotional investment is believing that it's real, you try to, at least I tried to sort of just ignore it, and you sort of make justifications like, well, maybe there's a rule that you can't do a closed fist punch, or maybe these guys just miss their forearms or something. I made all kinds of excuses, and this was around like, I think like around the just leading into the Attitude Era is when it's like, okay, there's something to this, but I still believed it was competition, and you get to the Attitude Era, and Vince Russo and this whole crash TV philosophy, and it's like, okay, there's no way around it. Like, this is obviously not real, but I'm still kind of entertained by it,
I was deeply emotionally conflicted by this question from about 1995 to about 1998 on the grounds that the only thing I've ever considered as a career option in my life, aside from wanting to do music, was I briefly wanted to be a wrestler.
Look at
and
that.
So I remember, as El elaborated on, there was always playground kids, somebody trying to make sure that that they thought it was fake. And being that I was the kid walking around with the PWI almanac, I would try to counter argue that by saying, well, no, Dr. D. David Schultz slapped the life out of John Stossel over this question. And there was a real lawsuit, and he really busted his eardrums. And, I'd be making reference to old things Lawler did in Memphis, and, really trying to argue and ride for it. And I remember being conflicted, thinking to myself, like, this is me alone in my thoughts, thinking, well, what if it is fake? And so I remember at the time, my solution to this matter was like, well, I'll learn how to do all the moves. I'll learn how to really do all this stuff just in case it's not. And then if I get there and it's fake, then, I'll be okay. That was my, 16-year-old logic. But then as time gets on, like by the time I'm getting ready to graduate high school, we're well into the Attitude Era, and we have the Montreal screw job and things like that. And I'm like, you're making this difficult on me. And, then I kind of fell back in love, with the idea of wanting to do music. And, that was the end of me wanting to be a wrestler. But that for a few years, that was like something I really wrestled with, like not knowing. So
how long did you train for, man?
I call it training loosely, but for about maybe 3 years, I would say, through ninth, 10th, and 11th grade. I used my little money working at the grocery store to get some wrestling mats. And I had a younger brother who, wanted to be a wrestler too. And we would practice moves on each other. And, my homeboy had a makeshift ring and things like that. So, I obviously my body frame is not really built to be a pro wrestler. So I would call it training loosely, but I can take a flat back bump on stage and not hurt myself.
That is sick.
But as time goes on, like by the time backyard wrestling, because you got to understand something, to touch on something El, said earlier, is like there was a time like being a wrestling fan was really uncool and taboo, and you were not cool if you were into this. So saying that to say, when I was in a backyard wrestling federation, it was very, ooh, by the time backyard wrestling comes, becomes fashionable, I'm seeing these other local kids and like they're blading, like they're
kicking.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh man!
At that point, I'm like, okay, maybe we're going too far now.
Oh wow, that's crazy! Wow, that's wild. Yo, El, did you ever entertain the thought of, hopping in a ring?
No. Well,
No,
not
never?
serious. Not
Yeah, not
seriously. I
seriously.
mean,
Okay.
we would always, especially in the wintertime, and there'd be like lots of snow outside. So recess, we would have these like play wrestle matches. So if I tried to suplex someone onto like the snow, at least it like no one would be hurt or anything like that. But I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, when I got to high school, and so at this point we're well into the Attitude Era, kind of transitioning to ruthless aggression, and some friends of mine who kind of went to a different school. Like, yeah, they had like a whole backyard federation, and
Nice.
I mean, they didn't do it for particularly long, but they videotaped like all of them, and so I'd heard about it. I'm like, oh, I heard you guys wrestle. Like, what's the deal? They let me borrow one of their tapes, and I mean, it's as amateur as it gets, but I mean, they were really trying to do stories, and my one homie, I guess they planned this whole story arc where he was on a losing streak, and he was really losing his way, and that sort of led into his heel turn, and he turned his back on his crew, like bro's like really like thought out like the stories and everything.
Sick.
And I
That's
thought
sick.
like, yo, this is the dopest thing in the world. Like when you guys like doing another one, like I want to just be there to just watch it,
Yo, homie was like a baby TK.
Basically, yeah. I mean,
Damn, that's sick.
like it was cool, yeah, because beyond just the actual wrestling nature of it, I mean, they were trying to book, which I thought was dope. Now, like most things, people sort of latch on to something, and then guys get girlfriends, guys want to focus on other things. Some of them played basketball or football or other sports, and I think they only really did like, I guess, 2 like tapings before everyone kind of just did their own thing.
That's so sick though.
Yeah, but it's I feel like everybody has like I don't know too many people whose wrestling fandom has been super strong all the way through. Like I feel like I kind of started off pretty excited for it. Attitude Era / Nitro, I got really excited. I kind of fell the fuck off after about like 04.
Okay.
And kind of keeping up with it just loosely. Sort of came back to it in the early 2010s with like Danielson and Punk, but that was also my introduction to like ROH and just indie wrestling, and Japan and so forth. And so it's kind of gone up down. I'm kind of like, I would say maybe at my most emotionally invested since I was a kid, but it's been a journey.
What about you, Jake?
How has my fandom changed over the years?
Yeah. Do you find that you had a starting point, you had that drop off, and then you kicked back in? Or was it consistent?
I agree with what Elle says. I think just about every wrestling fandom is cyclical to some degree. Like,
just like the business.
I jumped into it with both feet, listening to pay-per-views on Scramble Vision, practicing my submission holds. then you get to a point where you kind of run out of gas. And, you know, when I moved to New York in '06, I went maybe 4 years without watching any wrestling at all, hardly. From there, when things start coming around, like the WWE Network and, you know, the wrestling podcast, you know, the many that we have now, I start finding ways that I can work wrestling back into my life, you know, and keep it close to me without having to necessarily watch a lot of programming, you know, that I might not be interested in. Now, to some degree, I think I may have taken that too far, because I know I have missed some good stuff in recent years between, you know, New Japan or some of the stuff AEW's been doing and things like that. But, you know, I did within the last maybe 4 or 5 years have heavily regained. You know, I don't have a lot of quote unquote downtime, you know, with everything I'm working on at any given point. But if I do have downtime, you're more than likely going to catch me with something on the WWE Network, or I'm listening to a podcast, or, you know, and it's even kind of worked its way in, not to over philosophize the matter, or to sound like the guy who's in therapy, but immersing myself in wrestling has like almost become self-care to a degree, because it allows me to go back to a time where kayfabe was alive, where I'm kind of able to suspend, you know, my beliefs and my disbeliefs, you know, and be entertained, and just get back to a time where like the problems could be solved by good versus evil, as opposed to this apocalyptic nightmare that we live in currently.
I like your point.
You know, so even if it's just me taking an hour to watch some old pay-per-view, that's an hour that like I'm not stressing or not worrying about something, or not, you know, it's very
escapism.
It's escapism. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I just consider wrestling part of my self-care routine now. And, you know, so, but I agree, it goes in cycles.
I got a question for both of you. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. Now, when you watch wrestling now, whether it's like current or new content, or you're kind of revisiting something from back in the day, or whatever. So now that we're all quote unquote smart fans, or smarks, I hate that term so much. But are you able to watch any form of wrestling nowadays and sort of turn off the analytical smart part of your brain, where you're like, you know, where you kind of like see the wires? Like, can you kind of just invest in it like the way that you could when you were a kid?
Current wrestling, not at all. Like, I will be viewing it through the lens of, well, they botched that, or, you know, you know, I to some degree, I can watch old wrestling that way. Although I do have a higher radar for, if, you know, for just things that are out of the ordinary, things I would not have caught if you're not a smart fan, or you don't learn how to recognize someone course correcting a mistake in the middle of the ring. Like, sometimes with older wrestling, I'll be able to pick that stuff out, but it's a little bit easier for me to just sit back and watch the show. And, you know, if I'm watching new stuff, it's almost like I'm backstage in the gorilla position. I'm just overanalyzing everything. And maybe that's the X factor, is that I can't turn kayfabe back on in my mind, I guess.
Right.
I think that's a great point. I love how you said it's like you're in gorilla, because literally that's what it feels like watching any new wrestling product. It feels like you're in gorilla and you're analyzing, going, oh, hey, so was that supposed to happen? Oh, that looked like that was a miscue. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really hard to just watch it now.
Right. Like, and I wasn't even talking like just like the actual like in ring. It's like, you know, they might, like, for instance, on AEW, they just did a tournament for the Owen Hart Foundation Cup. And it's like, you look at, and, you know, you're looking at the brackets, and it's like, oh, it's going to be CM Punk versus Ricky Starks in the end. like no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And it's just, you're just sort of looking at, how the show is booked and who has more momentum and who's more over and yada yada yada. And it's like, man, if I was watching this when I was like 5, I don't know if I come to that same conclusion, because you're just looking at it solely from under the eyes of someone who believes these guys are really getting in a fight. Like, yo, Hobbs is bigger than all these dudes. He should walk all over them. But and sometimes it's like I try at various times to like not get involved in wrestling Twitter and some of the dirt sheet shit. Like shouts out to Sean Rossap and Fightful and some of those guys. They do great work, but sometimes it's just like, sometimes I feel like knowing too much is, everyone loves the tea and everyone wants to kind of like, know everything, but sometimes sometimes not knowing makes a product more fun, and I'm a little at odds with it sometimes.
It's very true. That's why I like it when we get swerved. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
that's why I love the swerve.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like the one thing I notice wrestling fans, like, anytime anything happens that they don't have the answer for, and the immediate thing is, oh, it's a work, or so forth, and it's just like, yo, if I get worked, like
you're doing well,
like,
right?
Thank you.
You're doing what you should.
Yeah.
I like when there's a pay-per-view or something happening and I have no idea what's going to happen. I like when they, and especially in this era where everybody knows everything, they do something that we don't see coming. And people sort of get angry about it. Like, how dare you work me? Like, I follow PWI, so I should know exactly what happened. It's like, no, like I encourage folks to work me, and I try not to. I never read spoilers. I don't want to know what happens on anything until I see it for myself. Sometimes you just sort of see it by accident, but yeah, I mean, it's never been harder for performers to successfully work people, and when MJF does some wild shit, like, I'm hook, line, and sinker.
Yep. And I think the one thing that I found, the easiest way to return to that suspension of disbelief is to watch it live, because with no commentary and just the crowd and the action in the ring, you can kind of let that suspension of disbelief, take over a little bit, and you just get lost in it for a couple of hours. Whereas the television product, you're just going to analyze that shit to death.
Right.
Like, and I mean to death.
Well, yeah, and it's always wild when you go to a live show and you walk away like, oh, this was dope, or I like this match, or such and such, and and I might go back, and a few days later I might just like watch the TV broadcast of it, and on the broadcast, on commentary, there's all these like story tidbits that they're giving you, which you don't get in the arena, and sometimes there's promos and segments that you don't see when you're live, and it's almost more pure that way, and you have to sort of rely more on physical in-ring storytelling than Excalibur or Michael Cole or whoever, and kind of holding your hand through the whole story beats.
We're gonna get into a little bit of a like brand by brand like conversation right quick, but before we do, I wanted to get your opinions on one particular thing when it comes to wrestling. I mean, wrestling, we've talked about the origins. We know, it basically came out of the Barnum and Bailey like tent, right? And it's an American pastime that, woo, blew the fuck up internationally. And back in the day, people used to liken it to the male soap opera. And at the time, I thought it was a good, way of referring to it as, you're right, it is a male soap opera. But now, I think it's transcended that, like, incredibly. I think it's long transcended just being a male soap opera, because the amount of money that people are making now in wrestling, I've never seen anything like this before. You could be an indie wrestler, and if you're good, and if you can market yourself and you can talk, you got a chance. You know what I mean? You've got a chance.
Yeah, and I mean, like Cody Rhodes used to talk about it. I mean, I know he's making way more now, but but he was saying his first year or two of his indie run after he left WWE, it's like, I made more money just hustling the indies and New Japan and stuff like that than his Stardust days and so forth. And like Matt Cardona talks about that shit all the time. God. Him and Steph DeLander, they make way more than they did, in the big machine.
Yep.
And and Matt Cardona in particular, I think he figured out very quickly that anyone can just have a wrestling match, but he's really smart and creative with how he sort of generates his own buzz. And so while I think he'll probably end up back in WWE one day,
probably,
he never has to go back. He's killing it, and he doesn't need the machine. He can make his own schedule. He can do whatever he wants.
Yep.
Jake,
why do you think? Why do you think it's had? I mean, just if you compare wrestling now, man, like now in 2023, even to the Attitude Era, like what wrestling is now is a completely different beast.
Well, it is. I think this is yet another parallel that the wrestling business draws with the music business.
There you go.
That, in both of their previous eras, there was kind of a wall between quote unquote us and them. Like you were either signed to the WWF or WCW, or you were a struggling indie wrestler making $25 a night in a high school gymnasium for 10 or 15 people. And the music business used to kind of be the same way. If you weren't in the major label system, you were generally viewed as a scrub, an unsigned wannabe, pick your favorite term. But, in the same way that we now have more tools at our disposal to break those walls down and reach our audience directly, an indie wrestler can go on Twitter now and say, hey, I'm now taking bookings.
Yeah.
Whereas, in the past, like the wrestler wouldn't have even been involved in that conversation. There would have been two promoters calling one another from some smoke-filled room to some other smoke-filled room saying, hey, I got such and such, and they would trade talent. So it's one of those things where you kind of don't have to sit around and wait to be chosen anymore. You can take these matters into your own hands a little bit more. So, and even on the same token, wrestlers have always been able to sell merch to the point, they call them gimmicks, but I don't think for a long time it occurred to a lot of wrestlers that they should be pressing up and selling their own merch. So, in the same way that, people like Elaquent and myself live in our own little ecosystem of the music business where there's a community of people who care about what we do, and we kind of stay afloat by reaching these people directly. You can do that now as a wrestler, without having to worry if Vince McMahon thinks you're marketable enough, or if Eric Bischoff likes you. So I think that's a good thing, because that allows more people to to put some food on the table. So
let more people eat. Hell yeah, definitely. Now, if I were to say, fellas, let's going out to a show. Let's go to a show. We all happen to be in the same market for some crazy reason. Let's go to a show, and it just so happens on that same night, AEW, GCW, WWE, Impact, Defy. Let's just go those 5 for now because those are the most notable and most talked about. I find they all happen to be running a show the same goddamn night, and we all happen to be in the same goddamn city at the same time. Which one do you guys want to go to?
I mean, that scenario you painted isn't all that off. I mean, you see, like WrestleMania weekend.
That's basically
they'll literally all run shit like all within a day or two of one another. Mm-hmm. So I mean, out of all of them, I mean, for me, probably now, assuming these are just regular shows and not like
house shows, house shows,
like WrestleMania or some shit.
These are house shows.
Now I've only been to a handful of AEW shows, but I mean I've heard the GCW shows go pretty crazy. So I definitely love to check one of those. But it's, I don't know, it's kind of one of those, what am I in the mood for? At various times, each respective company's, changes in terms of intrigue and hotness. Like WWE is selling everything out. Ticket prices are insane. Lately, I've always been, a bigger AEW guy, but I kind of love that outlaw spirit of GCW. And Defy's been doing some crazy stuff too,
right?
So it's hard. I mean, it could just come down to flip a coin, flip it a few times, but if that opportunity presents itself today, I'm probably checking out Defy or GCW.
I totally forgot MLW, by the way. No disrespect to MLW.
Yeah, I mean, well, it kind of leads to another interesting thing. I mean, we just spent a bit of time talking about, how, just profitable it is for indie guys and how everyone's just making more money, and that's a beautiful thing. But it's like, I mean, I went from, like I was watching kind of just only WWE for a while. The early era of NXT, I used to watch the hell out of it. AEW's been great. I'm getting back into New Japan. It feels like there isn't enough hours in the day to sort of keep up with everything. No. I guess it's a good problem to have, but man, it is so hard.
So flip a coin? Flip a coin?
Flip a coin, indeed.
Okay.
100%.
Jake, what are you saying? Which show are we going to?
Given that scenario and those choices, I think I would probably go with New Japan on the grounds that I have seen the WWF, WWE, depending on what year it was. I've been to WWF shows 7 or 8 times, I'd say, over the years. And, as out of the loop as I am with their current product, like I did back when we were actually trading VHS cassettes, used to watch a lot of New Japan. And getting access to, New Japan cassettes as a Tennessee teenager was like, finding the Ark of the Covenant at that time. So I would love to actually just see New Japan live, before, the apocalypse. So that would probably be my choice given that scenario.
Okay. Of all the shows that y'all have seen up to now, which show stands out to you the most?
For me, I was fortunate enough to see the AEW New Japan Forbidden Door 2.
I hate you, yes.
So that... Man. I mean, I knew that I was...
It was in your market, no fair.
I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. I mean, that's the only pay-per-view that I've seen live. And I mean, I knew it was going to be a good show. Like at the time I bought tickets, there was literally nothing announced. So I kind of just trusted that they'll, put together a good card. And it was a good card, but, seeing Kenny and Will Ospreay throwdown for like 40 minutes or whatever it was. I mean, that was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the event could have been just that singular match, and I wouldn't have complained. So that, and the other 3 shows I've seen a couple Dynamites. I saw a Collision show, which was a lot of fun, like the day before Forbidden Door. But yeah, that was definitely the craziest show that I've seen.
For me, so this is weird, but it's a random WCW house show from 1999 in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, the significance...
They didn't do too many of... they didn't do a lot of house shows back then.
Damn. No, they didn't. We were just enough in their territory that we would get WCW house shows, but the significance of that house show was not even the wrestling that occurred that night. It was the fact that I rang up Chris Benoit's groceries the following day.
Let's go.
So,
what?
Okay.
Holy shit.
So I'm a teenager. I have a song with Rock Marciano actually called Manila Envelopes. It's on about 3 albums
Let's
ago.
Go.
And I talk about it in this song. I have a little bar where I mention it. But so what basically happened was this, is that, following day, I'm on duty at there was a chain of supermarkets in Tennessee called Ingles, and I worked at Ingles. And so off in the distance, you have to understand, like in East Tennessee, we did not have celebrity sightings. It's, in the time I've lived in New York, you get very desensitized to it because you see people all the time. But in Tennessee, anyone who was on the quote unquote television was just not someone you ran into in real life. So I'm manning the cash register, bored to death, and I see someone in the distance, and I'm like, he looks like Chris Benoit.
No shit.
And starts walking closer, pushing a grocery cart, and I'm like, he really looks like Chris Benoit. All of a sudden, Chris Benoit and Nancy, who at that time was woman, who was rolling with the Four Horsemen. And, we had no idea that, they were shoot together. And this was the funny thing about kayfabe was at that time, I was mildly confused why was woman with Chris Benoit. But I didn't question it because Benoit was a horseman. So anyway, point being, I see them pulling their grocery cart into my checkout lane, and I'm hyperventilating. Because I'm like, oh my God, I'm 4 feet away from. Now I understand today, for obvious reasons, being a Chris Benoit fan is a very complicated matter, and not something that people generally want to proclaim too loudly. But at that time, he was in my top 5 dead or alive.
Easily.
And
Come on.
Especially if you're a smaller guy who wants to be a wrestler, he's the man.
Come on.
And so. Point being is that they by the time they get their cart to my aisle, some of the ladies who worked in the bakery had caught wind he was there and come running over trying to get autographs from Benoit. Now he very quietly is like, yeah, no problem, and he's signing autographs. Well, there was a 80-something-year-old gentleman named Harry that worked at the supermarket who goes, "Who the hell is he?" Before anyone can say anything, teenage Jake goes, "That's Chris Benoit." I said, he debuted in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada in 1988 as the Wild Pegasus.
Oh, yo! You smarted him up.
Chris Benoit is holding a piece of paper, signing an autograph, and looks at me both impressed and totally creeped out. And he goes, "Damn, you're wrestling, huh?"
Oh, shit.
And I didn't say anything because I was shook.
My God.
They bought a loaf of bread, some sandwich meat, and they briefly made these Lay's chips that had like Olestra. It was like some kind of fat substitute that they later, it found out it killed people or gave you cancer. They bought a bag of those chips.
Oh, shit.
And then they left.
Oh, my God.
Now, in hindsight, what clearly happened is that WCW was in Knoxville the night before. They were on the way to the next town. They stopped at the supermarket, and I just happened to be the one got to ring them up. But that moment floored me because that was the first time I'd ever seen someone from the other side of the television in real life, and I was able to impress / alarm him with my knowledge of their work.
Jake, man, that story
That's
still
fire,
floors.
yo.
That story still floors. Okay, I'm still kind of like, holy, what the? Did that just happen? Whoa, yo, L man, you got any interesting one-on-one situations? He's like, yeah, a couple.
Well, as far as anybody like connected to pro wrestling, I don't think I mean, after Forbidden Door, I crossed paths with Aubrey Edwards, but
Oh, yo,
No.
nice,
you know, like
nice.
yeah, she was really nice, but it wasn't like it wasn't really like a noteworthy story in any particular way. I mean, I've crossed paths with like rappers and producers, and it's funny, Jake, you mentioned kind of being in New York, and everyone's sort of just like so desensitized to it. And I remember one of the last times I was in New York, I think I had a show there as part of a small tour, and I remember we're at just some coffee shop, me and some of the other guys on the show, and one of the guys is like, hey, look behind you," and like I just turn around and like, oh shit, like there's Questlove, fro and all,
Right.
and and I'm kind of like geeking out, but then it's like, I'm trying to like angle my phone in a way where I can kind of like catch him, and then I kind of just like, what, like, no, let me not be that guy. I'm way too old to kind of be doing that shit, and I figure this guy he probably gets mobbed quite a bit, so I'm not gonna be that guy, but
Yeah.
but it was like, oh, like, yeah, bro was literally like 4 feet away from me. So
That's crazy.
at the time, it's like, this. I mean, he might have been one of the most famous people I've come across. Sometimes it's sort of a don't meet your heroes sort of
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
So
That's
sometimes,
real.
well, and I've sort of come to realize over time, it's like sometimes it's like you'll just meet people organically and you'll have a cool moment, kind of like yours
Yeah.
with Benoit. But I try not to get too up before meeting someone, because I think we've all had those situations where you meet someone and they're not nearly as cool as they come across.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
On
Oh,
TV
yeah.
or online, and it's like
More times than I care to say.
yeah, and honestly, it's just like one of like my biggest heroes, like musically, who like inspired me in terms of production, and I kind of found out that he's kind of a dick, and it's from that day on, it's just like, all right, let me never meet my heroes, or at least go out of my way. If it happens, it happens, but
I hear you.
people. I mean, these are regular people, and
People
regular
are
people you
people,
come
man.
across. Regular people you come across are sometimes
Yep.
assholes. It just is what it
People
is.
are people. Speaking of assholes, back in the Attitude Era, there was a WWE. I'm sure it was a house show that came through this market, and we were in a hotel that wrestlers usually stayed at because we were there for a party. We were actually there for an 18th birthday celebration, a debut, 18th birthday debutante's ball. Okay, and it was my homie's sister's debutante's ball. So we're kind of wilding in the hotel. We're drinking. Just being a bunch of stupid kids, right? We open up the elevator, and standing in front of us is Mick motherfucking Foley. And we legit didn't know it. We got in, obviously, but we're just like, is anyone going to say anything? No one said shit. We all just like, face forward in the elevator. We're like, is anyone going to say anything before we get off this elevator? And you could tell we were all looking at each other like, someone say some shit. No one said shit. Elevator door opens. I finally turn around and go, yo, you're Mick Foley, right?
Stop to make sure.
He's like, yep. Like, just chill. He's like, yep. Like, I get this all the time. Yep. You know? I'm like, awesome. Thanks. And we're like, okay, cool. But remember, we're in the hotel where they're obviously staying. So in the hallway, we see the Harris brothers. Remember the Harris brothers?
Yes. Jacob and Eli Blue, creative control.
They're tall and they're big. That's all I'm going to say. So, okay, again, you know, we're kind of wilding. So, some of the fellas been getting their drink on. Someone found out where they were staying and fucking called pizza to their fucking room. Ordered them pizza. Randomly ordered them pizza. Like, we didn't order this. I'm like, no, it's for you. Someone ordered them pizza, and we happened to be right there when it happened. Because it was one of my boys that did it. We're like, fuck, you ordered a pizza and we're standing right here for him to get the pizza? Are you fucking serious?
Man.
Yeah. And then to finish off that weekend, because it was a weekend, Sunday morning, I guess obviously they're getting ready to fly out. We're hungover as hell. We're in the lobby getting all our stuff out. Undertaker walks by. We're like, are you fucking serious? But we're hungover as shit, okay? So no one gives a fuck anymore. Like, no one's going to mark out. It's just like, yo, it's the fucking Undertaker. Okay, cool. And then on our way out, I see in the coffee shop Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and China. I'm like, holy fuck, DX is in the fucking coffee shop, guys. I know we didn't say anything to Mick Foley when we were in the fucking elevator with him, but how are we not going to say something to DX?
Right.
So they're like, who's going to do it? I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. I walked in there and I'm like, why? And you know when as you're walking, you realize maybe this is a dumb idea. Why am I actually walking up to these performers right now to mark out? But you get it closer to the table. You're like, okay, I'm getting too close. I can't back out now. And I meekly go, hey guys, you guys are awesome. And then they're just letting me like, yeah, thanks. And like at that point, DX is at their height. They're probably just tired. They're on the road. I understand. At the time, I didn't. But looking back now, I know last thing they wanted to hear is fucking Sunday morning before they get on the flight, this mark coming out of nowhere to just start marking out. And all I can muster was, hey, so can I get an autograph? Triple H looks at me like, nah. Okay, fuck off. And I just walked away like, wow, fuck you.
I mean, I used to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like I'm basically that exact same scenario with a rapper who shall remain nameless many years ago, and I remember kind of just like really being in my feelings about it, and kind of over time it's like, man, I've done gigs or something, and I've just been exhausted afterwards. Like, I just want to get back to my hotel, and someone is asking me like, oh, what sort of EQ setting did you use on that one joint you made 9 years ago? And it's just
my god,
boy, don't get the fuck out of here with that nerd shit. I mean, I'd say that, but it's like I've felt it, and so it's like I try not to judge people, by their, in those moments where they might be like exhausted or whatever.
For sure.
Although, in my instance, it was sort of, like bro didn't really want to take a picture or sign an autograph. Okay, that's cool. I respect it.
Yeah,
only to like, walk past him 20 minutes later, or he's like, mobbed up by honeys outside of the venue, and it's just like, it's like, fam, that photo, it's like I opened up for you. That photo would have taken 5 seconds, and then you're on, so it's like, okay, it is what it is, but but I mean, especially
It is what it
nowadays,
is. Exactly.
and you know,
I mean,
you kind of keep hearing about,
yeah.
you know, all these wrestlers getting like mobbed at the airport, and you know, they're asked to sign like
100
30
items. Yeah.
30
Yeah,
items, which
man.
all go up on eBay like
For
5 hours
real though.
later.
Yo, what if both y'all dealt with that on the regular? Honestly.
Oh, I
Like
mean,
like if this
if
was
anybody if anybody steps to me, and again, I'm not famous like that, obviously, but
but still, I mean,
but yeah, but somebody steps to me and is requesting 30 autographs, and they're trying to gaslight me into feeling like I'm an asshole if I say no. It's
yeah,
like,
no
get the
man.
fuck out of here.
Nah. In terms
Yeah.
of that type of thing, and it's like because I mean, obviously public figures, like there's no, you know, we all know the deal, right? Y'all public figures, that's just the way it is, right? And that's just part of being a public figure. Like if a random's going to come up to you because you did something that somehow, you know, affected them in some way, then if they're feeling so inclined, they might just come up to you and you know ask you something like what EQ did you use in what's up. But that is literally a part of being a public figure, and y'all knew that going into it anyway. You know, you just kind of like ride the wave as best you can.
Right.
Yeah, right. You just have to you have to remember to some degree, like those are the people that are keeping you in business, and
Exactly.
you know, they are owed a certain degree of courtesy. Now, at the same time, that goes both ways. Like they're not allowed to bum rush
Exactly.
you at the airport with 30 items to
Exactly.
sign.
Oh,
Like,
come on.
you know, so I mean, surely to God, like there's some kind of comfortable medium in between. So
Well, I think that's why the cons are dope.
yeah, right. It's a little more
Because
structured and you know a little
yeah,
more direct.
exactly.
You know,
They don't have to
and
get so crazy.
everybody knows why they're there. You're in a controlled environment for the
Exactly.
purpose of being able to fan out. You know,
Yep. Yep.
things like that. So no,
Exactly.
that's definitely a dope space for that.
So in terms of storylines, as we slowly start to wrap things up, in terms of storylines, what storyline has stuck with you going into 2023 after X amount of years of enjoying this professional sports entertainment phenomenon? And what storyline currently, so part one and part two, what storyline currently is just flames? So of all time and current.
So as far as current, the Bloodline storyline, admittedly,
Yeah.
has been pretty awesome. Now, I'm also of the opinion that it's kind of run for too long.
Oh yeah, jump
And
the shark.
they need to either end it or they need to do some new wrinkle because I feel like this is a story that, while very well told, they've really dragged it longer than it needed to be.
Yeah,
You know,
you've wrung it out. You've wrung it out.
right? But I can't, you know, pretend it's not.
They made the money.
Certainly by WWE standards, and frankly, I've not been a fan of their storytelling for a very long time. But
But they
that's
killed it with that.
by and large, they did a great job with that one.
Yeah.
As far as in general or altogether, I think I'd mentioned the HBK split. I really like that story.
Yeah.
Let's see. I mean the Elite, or not them. I mean CM Punk. He had an awesome story with Rey Mysterio back in his WWE days, the Straight Edge Society shit.
Okay.
And I remember there's a promo in particular where Rey Mysterio and his family were in the ring saying their thank yous and shit, and Punk and Gallows and Serena Deeb come out, and he's basically like telling raise kids to their face that, yo, I'm about to beat the shit out of your old man. But yeah, that's one of my personal favorite ones. I mean, I know there's, everyone loves like the NWO, and there's been a bunch of great stories over the years. I mean, those are kind of that one is probably a less or a more obscure one, but I always, it always gravitated to me.
I'm so out of the loop. I would say that as far as current storylines, the only two that I have become invested in recent, in the last year or two, not to piggyback off what Elle said, but it would either be the Bloodline or it would be the Rey Mysterio and Dominic angle.
Okay.
I thought that
and
was
with
pretty
good
well
reason
executed.
Hell yeah.
That's a good one.
Because the thing is the storytelling got so far-fetched for a while that you forget that sometimes the simplest things can have, in this case, resentment between a father and a son, and, trying to prove, all that. I thought that angle was pretty well executed. So as far as contemporary stuff, those are the two that I've gravitated towards lately. Of all time, it's one of two. It's either probably when Bret Hart went away and then came back to face Steve Austin. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about WrestleMania 13.
Okay.
I'm talking about when Steve Austin and Bret Hart wrestled at the Survivor Series in '96. So Bret had lost the Iron Man match to Shawn at WrestleMania 12. I was crushed. Bret leaves to go, film Lonesome Dove and, acts as if he's not coming back. Steve Austin's star begins to rise during that time. Bret comes back on TV, and come to find out that was actually a shoot that, Vince was not in the loop if he was going to re-sign or not. So I was at the edge of my seat. Now, so when Bret decides he's coming back and he's staying with the WWF, of course, they put him up with Steve Austin. Now, in my mind, I was worried sick because Steve Austin was on a run at that time, making his initial first run into superstardom. So when they got to the Survivor Series, now everyone talks about their WrestleMania match. I'm like one of the weirdos that actually prefers their match at the Survivor Series because Steve Austin had not hurt his neck yet. He could still do very good technical wrestling.
Yeah.
And they paid a tribute at the end of that match to Bret Hart versus Piper at WrestleMania 8, where Bret was in a sleeper hold and he kicks his feet off the ropes into a cradle. So saying that to say that when Bret came back and was able to get the better of Steve Austin, like my faith in life was restored that day. They turned him heel later, and then, the screw job happened. The only other runner-up that I would say I was maybe as equally emotionally invested in would maybe be Ric Flair and Terry Funk. When, Funk broke his neck, and then, they had an incredible match at the Great American Bash, and then they later had the I Quit match at the Clash of the Champions. I was really invested in that one, I would say.
Okay. Going back to like early days, WWE, when they had their little Jake the Snake versus Rick Rude, and the wife got involved. And then Rude put the wife on his I'm sorry. That still to me is like, boom.
Bro, that might be the most disrespectful thing I ever seen in wrestling. It's like, whoa, like Rick Rude, you need to get your ass whooped for that one.
Yes, man. And did you not want to see him get his ass whooped? Did you not want to see that happen?
It was hit him up for his time. Like, it was one of the coldest disses that ever, up to that point in wrestling. Like,
loved it. That will always stand out.
I forgot about that one. That one was
because I love my diss tracks. So I really, I gotta call back to their little run that they had together. And then in terms of current times, I definitely got to give it up to New Japan because that kind of got me back into wrestling. Because after the Attitude Era, I fucked off. I ruthless aggression, I couldn't say anything about. I had to catch up after the fact on a whole lot of shit. But when when the elite run in New Japan was really starting to pick up, I was introduced to that randomly by my homie. I'm like, y'all still watch wrestling? And they're like, yeah. Did you used to watch it? I'm like, yeah, when it was good. And like, oh, you think it sucks? I'm like, it does suck. Then they said, watch this. I'm like, oh, what the fuck is this? And it reinvigorated my love of wrestling. So it's definitely going to the pre-AEW elite run in New Japan with Cody, because that's also
Cody.
how I got into Cody, because I knew who Cody was from before. I'd already dropped out from when he was Stardust, but I still kind of knew, kind of like Jake, you kind of still stay in touch. But that Stardust shit to me was like, yeah, that's why I don't watch that, because no thank you, right? So to see this guy who was a WWE guy say, all right, I'm out and I'm going to do this my way and watch what I do. All I saw was like an indie rapper that said, fuck the majors. I'm going to go and fucking do this shit. So those parallels were so real to me that I hopped on the Cody train, because I'm like, yo, I'm going to follow this, because this literally reminds me of like a rapper that said, fuck the majors. I'm going to do this for Dolo. That's legit what I thought of. So it was hard not to get invested in it. You know what I mean? So it was that run, that pre-AEW New Japan elite run.
Yeah, I mean, I'd known about New Japan. I mean,
yeah,
you kind of keep hearing the name, but
right,
I think it was just like, I'd be watching like Raw or SmackDown, and I'd be seeing people in the crowd with Bullet Club shirts, and you'd see them like a lot, and it's like, what the fuck is this Bullet Club thing that I've never heard of? And you Google it and you research it, and like, oh, okay, it's a thing in New Japan. Oh, wait a minute, that's the guy from TNA that I really liked. AJ Styles.
Right.
Oh shit, that guy's fucking awesome. And they're throwing up like the two sweets, and it's like, oh, this is okay. So this is basically New Japan NWO, but it's somehow like they just had their 10th year anniversary a couple months ago, and kind of just through there, it's like, okay, so these are the young bucks I keep hearing about, who all the old heads keep on getting angry about. Like, oh, they're ruining the business and they're super kicking people into oblivion. And it's like, I kind of dig this.
Exactly.
I kind of dig this attitude of like, oh, like, fuck the majors.
It's a bit of a fuck you attitude. Yeah, it was a bit of a fuck you attitude.
Yeah.
So, like, how could you not love that?
Yeah, and then, AJ leaves, and I'm hearing like, oh, this guy Kenny Omega is like best wrestler in the world. And, and it took me a while to sort of understand, because, watching New Japan for the first time is kind of wild.
Wow.
Everyone is just like, it's like super quiet and super slow.
You're like,
building,
what's going on?
And everyone's just like applauding quietly. Like, what the fuck? Like, where's the crowd? Why, but you kind of get it, and it sort of all leads to a climax and to a crescendo. Just as an aside, have you peeped any of the G1 this year?
I haven't been following it like crazy. Just kind of like paying attention to who's passing, but haven't like watched anything.
So this is the first year that I've tried to like
go hard on it,
legitimately sit down and like watch it all.
God.
And
fuck, that's a lot.
And I think I underestimated it. It's been good. Like, the wrestling's great for the most part. I mean, some of the matches are duds, but they do like 4 episodes a week, and they're like 3 hours long a piece. I watched like the first like 3 fully through. Then it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go out of my way to watch Eddie Kingston or Kazuchika Okada or some of like my favorite guys, and Naito just got crowned winner, and I didn't see any of the playoff matches it's just like, man, I was genuinely having fun watching that tournament, and it's great, but I find New Japan very, very hard to follow.
It's group chat fodder.
honestly, it's like
Everyone catches up through the group chat.
But honestly, for me, it's like, I watch as much of the G1 as I can, which this year I probably watched maybe 65% of it, or usually it's like 20, 30. It's like the G1 and then Wrestle Kingdom. And then, if there's buzz about a crazy match, I'll try to catch it then. But, it's like I sort of vowed, now that I'm, kind of working from home full time, between music and everything. It's like, all right, this is going to be the year that I catch up on all the wrestling that I promised myself I was going to watch, but this year I'm going to do it. So I'm going to watch all this New Japan. I'm going to finally, start watching Stardom, AEW. I'll catch maybe the WWE pay-per-views, and I'm going to catch some indie stuff. And there's people out there who do it religiously. Yeah. I don't know how they do it.
I don't either. There's not enough time of day.
Right.
Like, I love, apart from music, wrestling is maybe like the next thing I'm super passionate about. And it's like, I tap out so early. Like, I need to stop watching wrestling and doing some other things to not burn out of it.
It would have been great when we were younger to have access to all this shit now. You know what I mean? Because we had all the time in the world when we were younger.
Well, I was going over the other day. I was having a conversation with somebody about what my week as a wrestling fan used to look like when I was a teenager. And this was the weekly schedule. So on Mondays, you had Raw and Nitro. That, you were back and forth, tape one, watch one, whatever it was. By the time you got to Wednesday of the week, we used to get AWF wrestling out of Chicago. It was a very short-lived promotion out of Chicago that was mostly former WWF guys. They had a round system in '96. So then by the time you get to Friday, the original ECW television would come on at 2 a.m. on Fox Sports South.
Okay.
So I would stay up till 2 a.m. to watch that. Be up at 9 a.m. on Saturday for WCW Pro at 9 a.m., WWF Mania at 10 a.m., WWF Superstars at 11 a.m., WCW Worldwide at noon.
Oh my God.
Pause for 6 hours. Then you get 2 hours of WCW Saturday night. Wake up on Sunday. You have the WWF Action Zone at 12 noon, and then you had WCW Main Event at 6. So that was my week every week. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hours of cable television wrestling I used to consume a week.
Man, you just dusted off all those old shows. Like, whoa. Yeah, you literally forgot about half the shows you just mentioned until you mentioned, like, oh my God, that's right. There were that many, because they were like the house shows. They're literally just like house show tapings, right?
Shit,
I wonder how I did that. Like, how did I commit to 14 hours of television wrestling a week?
Damn.
I guess I didn't have much to do back then, but
it's like that, man.
Because nowadays it's like, and assuming
now
you're
it's
just keeping it, but now you're, assuming you're only keeping it to what's on TV. Yep. It's 3 hours Raw Monday. It's 2 hours NXT Tuesday. It's 2 hours Dynamite Wednesday.
Yep.
Thursday there's Impact for 2 hours and maybe
Friday.
ROH. Friday you have 2 hours SmackDown. Saturday now you have 2 hours Collision.
Yep.
Sunday. Yeah, well, occasionally pay-per-views, but I guess Sunday is your only break.
It's your rest day. And on the
it's your rest day, right? And it's like, man, it's like I can only commit to, I commit to Dynamite and Collision, and whether I watch SmackDown or Raw really just depends on, if there's a match or something I'm interested in. But WWE also does this weird thing where they don't feel like you should know like what matches are happening until you actually watch the show. Right. And it's like, it's like you'll find out. I'll find out on Twitter that Kevin Owens and Shinsuke Nakamura had a banger. It's like, I guess I'll go and look for it. But
imagine if you'd advertised that, right?
Right. And I don't. Well, I was going to say I don't know why they don't do it, but with Vince changing his mind every like 5 minutes about the card, like 10 minutes before the show, it's like, well, I guess it doesn't really make sense to advertise for it.
Vince is a whole nother topic altogether. We won't even
need a whole show for that.
We won't even touch that one. That's a whole show.
Facts.
Yo, yeah, for real, man. I really want to thank both of you. I very deliberately asked the both of you to participate in this because of the markets that you're in, because I felt like we'd get some interesting perspectives, because I know I'm in a wrestling market, and I know both of y'all in wrestling markets or had, wrestling markets in your background. So I knew getting these different perspectives would probably make for an interesting conversation. So I really want to thank y'all.
Thanks
thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. When I first brought this up to you guys on Twitter, I think I was like partly serious, partly joking. And then it just dawned on me, like, wait a minute, why couldn't we do this though?
And anyone wants to talk graps with me,
I'll be there.
There isn't any scenario where I say no to it.
Right.
So.
And it's like that. And on that note, I hope you guys are down to do this again.
For sure.
Yeah, just shine the bat signal. I'll be out here.
We will definitely do this again. Maybe we'll like do topical shit. You know what I mean? Maybe that Vince episode will come out. But I really want to thank you both, because this was a bit of a different podcast. We kind of went left. We talk about hip hop all day, every day, and I felt like, hey, just because we love hip hop doesn't mean we can't talk about other things.
Right.
So I want to thank you both for jumping the deep end with me on this one. It was dope. I knew it would be.
Nah, it's my pleasure, man.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Now, of course, before you go, we got to get into current projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, this is always such a tough thing, because it's like,
I know.
You never, I don't want to like announce things before. Before
we don't have to announce anything.
Before I get the green light, but
we just want to know if you're working.
Yeah, let's just say that I'm keeping busy. I have a record that a really dope record that I finished a few months ago. That literally, as we're on the air, I got a text from the OG like, "Yo, it's go time." So it's like, okay, so I guess I'll be finding out no more about it soon enough.
Nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm working on right now. It's weird. Like, this is going to be the first year in like 15 years or so where I likely don't put out a project, but that means that 2024 is going to be a very busy year. So
okay,
it's on. It's on.
Jake, I know you're like 24/7 busy, but is there anything?
I have 5 jobs.
You're always, man. When are you not working?
I guess we'll run them down the list. As a rapper, my latest album is called Plant-Based Libtard. It is available everywhere. We're pretty close to hitting 1 million streams on Spotify with that one. So I'm going to try to break out another video or two and try and push that over. Thank you.
Let's go.
As a producer, I've got the Solving Cases album out with El the Sensei from the Artifacts. Yep. I've got an album dropping this fall with me and Lex the Hexmaster called Fire and Lead.
Let's go.
As an engineer, I just mixed Tony Touch new album on Def Jam called The Def Tape. Just mixed the Beat Miners new album. And then, on all of the above as a producer, rapper, and engineer, like I'm always working on something, so there's plenty more projects in the canon, and kind of similar to what El just said, like some of them I want to wait until they're a little closer to being done to talk about, but there's always something coming,
And y'all know when it's time to talk about it, we're going to hop back in here.
Absolutely.
Let's go. Absolutely.
You know that. Fellas, once again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I was looking forward to this. I knew it was going to be dope, and y'all just manifested that shit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll come back for round 2.
Round 2.
Get ready for round 2, y'all. Peace, guys. Thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Easy.
Yes, sir.